So thank you for choosing to be here today, whether you're physically in this room or hanging out in our Zoom room or the YouTube channel where nobody can see you. You're still part of this community. So I thank you for being here with us in this moment. And today I continue our review of the basic science of mind practices and principles. And from the spiritual thought that Sharon read earlier, you'd think I was going to talk about visioning. But I already did that. So instead, I'm going to talk about spiritual mind treatment, which to me is the big guns that we have, that we use when we can't make it work with any of the simpler tools. So anyway, we're going in for the big one today, and next week too, probably. But I'm going to start with Sharon, the affirmation and the reading that Sharon did, because there's only one, right? From Dr. Ernest Holmes, Science of Mind, page 284. We should have faith that there is but one mind. This mind is both the mind of each human and the mind of God. We use the mind of God since there is but one mind. This mind is the essence of creativeness and the essence of goodness. It is available to all since it has already incarnated through all. If we could actually take that in and own it, how would our lives change? If we could actually recognize that there is only one, and every single one of us lives in that, and because of that, and through that, and as that, how would your life be different? It's a huge question. And probably it unfolds over time. Because our logical brain says, well, there's God, and then there's me, and they're separate. And that's actually a false belief that we have. Every single one of us lives, moves, and has our being in this one mind, in this one spirit, in this one heart, in this one love, in this one joy, one peace, one power, whatever word you want to use for it. There's only one. And so we've got this thing, especially as Americans, that we think we have to be our own power source and that we have to operate independently. And that's not exactly true. Because the place we plug in to power is that universal wholeness. It's that universal beingness that is in everyone and moves everyone. So what's our job if we're part of this whole unity of being thing? Our job is to figure out what it is that we desire and align our feelings, our thoughts, our actions, and our way of being so that we are living as if that possibility is true for us. And it's part of our everyday experience. That's a real tall order. Because our experience of being human doesn't look like we think it ought to. Right? Most of the time. So how do we rearrange our thinking to see past this world of form and to see that capital T truth that is more accurate and more profound than anything that we experience in our day-to-day life? When you wake up and your back is going, like, wow, okay. I guess I need to stretch this morning. I have a back that's perfect, and then I have this one that's kind of kinked. And both parts of that experience are true. And we get to remember what's really true, which is that perfection that lives as each one of us. And so we get to this tool, which I call the biggest power tool we have, which is spiritual mind treatment. And it takes work to do it. Not because it's difficult, but it's difficult to change our mind about what our relationship is with power. How many of you were told not to be so much of yourself when you were young? Most of us. So today I want to talk about power. Now, a fair number of you, maybe many of you, in this room or in the Zoom room, were present when Edwene Gaines came and spoke to us from a different stage 10 years or so ago, more or less. And Edwene is a master of speaking. I'm not a performer, just in case you didn't know that. But Edwene is a master performer, even though she's now retired. Edwene could get up and she could get on the stage and she could say exactly the same words 75 times, and every single time they sounded fresh and new. It's like, I don't know how she does that. But every single talk that Edwene gave in that span of time 10 years ago, she started out by saying, "My name is Edwene Gaines, and what I want you to know about me is I am a woman of power." And you watch her videos from that point in time, and every single time after she does the band gratitude and raises her skirt about having her skirt blowed up by what the band did, she said that. And I am watching her as a speaker, and I'm going, wow. Because she was able to capture that essence of being. My name is Edwene Gaines, and what I want you to know about me is I am a woman of power. And you didn't doubt it for a second, because she was clear. Does that mean her life worked 100% of the time? Oh, no. Not ever. I mean, it worked sometimes, but it wasn't 100% of the time exactly as she desired it. But she knew how to move herself to that place because she knew where the source of her power was. And what her source of power, to me, it's a weird thing, but her source of power actually came from a verse in the Christian Old Testament and the Jewish Holy Scriptures from the book of Malachi. And her source of power that she grabbed onto with both hands was a piece of scripture. And it said, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out as much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." And she grabbed a hold of that with both hands, and she said, I got a rock to stand on. I know what's true for me. And she built a 40-year career on that. And she taught people over and over and over again using the same words. And if you were able to hear, you could see her relationship with the divine in those words for her. Because she had it. She knew where her power was. And she knew it wasn't self-generated. She knew she had a part of it, but it wasn't from her person. And she didn't take it on faith only. She tested it, she tried it, she worked with it, and she proved to herself that those words were true. And when she was in alignment with her definition of the divine, her life worked. And when it didn't work out like the way she wanted it to, she got to look at it and puzzle out what wasn't lined up. So in the first chapter of Eric Butterworth's Spiritual Economics, he told a story from the Christian and Hebrew Bible about a widow and the prophet Elisha. Now the widow was in a sorry state. She was poor. Her husband had died. Her 2 sons were about to be sold into slavery because she couldn't pay her bills. And Elisha came rolling by. And he asked her what she had of value in her house. And she thought he meant like in her house, because she was living in the world of form. Elisha was asking her what was in her consciousness, what was in her brain, what was in her thought. She said, "Oh, I got this 1 jug of oil." And it's like, yeah, I can see there's work here. And he says, "Okay, go to your neighbors, get all of the empty jugs you can find. All of them, gather them up." She's going, "I got 1 jug of oil, that's all I got. They're going to take my sons." So she goes and she gathers together as many of the empties as she can imagine. And she gets them together. He says, "Okay, start pouring." And she pours from this 1 jug over and over and over and over and over. And there's still oil in her 1 jug, and all of the jugs she could imagine were full. He says, "Okay, how you doing now?" The lesson was, it's not the form, people. It's not the physical experience. It's how we see it. And the practice of spiritual mind treatment is our tool to move us from the visual experience, which might be broken or apparently broken, to a place of being able to see, oh, that's right. I have a perpetual source that I can go to. I have a source of power. I have a source that is limitless in me. And I just have to call on it. And it's not me. I'm not doing it myself. I'm connected to the all that is. And that's what's doing the trick. So in the same chapter, which is the first chapter of Spiritual Economics, Butterworth quotes Emily Cady, Lessons of Truth. "One of the unerring truths in the universe is that there is already provided a lavish abundance for every human want. The supply of good always awaits the demand. And the demand must be made before the supply can come." And then Butterworth also quotes Lao Tzu. "The human spirit has its source in the divine fountain, which must be permitted to flow freely through the human. Anyone who flows as life flows has solved the enigma of human existence and needs no other power." And I know some people in this room, and probably in the Zoom room too, have experienced what would be called miracles in health and healing, in sorting out troublesome relationships, in improvements or radical changes in your finances as a result of practicing spiritual mind treatments or other spiritual principles that we teach. These aren't miracles. We call them demonstrations. They're proof. You test it, you try it, you prove it, and then you stand on it. Because you know you're not limited and restricted by the experience in front of your mind, in front of your eyes. In the Declaration of Principles, Dr. Holmes wrote, "We believe in the healing of the sick and the control of conditions through the power of this mind." There's not a caveat on that. There's not a yeah, but, or we only do easy things. It's we believe in the healing of the sick and the controlling of conditions through the power of this mind, period. Do we or not? We have to prove it to ourselves. And here's the thing that I teach in Foundations class. Some people have an easy time with healing. Some people have an easy time with money. Some people have an easy time with emotional relationship stuff. So people have different levels of resistance to change in different areas. So if you need support in an area that you're not strong in, that's what community is for. Because different people will have different skill sets. They will have different ways of relating to the world, relating to the capital W world, in a way that they don't get caught up in the story of not enough oil in their jug. I mean, we were joking last Monday night in the Monday night class. I mean, Maddie loves money, money loves Maddie. If you got trouble with money, talk to Maddie. Because she doesn't have resistance to that. Come on, money. And other people have the same relationship with health. They can work health issues because they are not stuck in what biology says. It's kind of cool, right? It's also kind of creepy. Because it's like, do I really have that much power? Like, yeah, when I remember what I'm plugged into. Because we our individual selves, don't do anything to change the experience. We change our thoughts, we change our beliefs, we change our attitudes about our experience. And the experience has to change. Holmes wrote in The Science of Mind on page 53, when we are dealing with real life, notice that, when we are dealing with real life, with thoughts, impulses, emotions, etc., we are dealing with causation, with original cause. And we should be careful how we deal with such powers and forces. Now, if I was writing it, I wouldn't write careful. I would pick a different word, like attentive or intentional. To me, that's more accurate. We should be intentional when we deal with such powers and forces. In dealing with these subtle powers of mind and spirit, we're dealing with a fluent force, which is changeable, which is fluid, which is not fixed and immobile. The world of form is changeable. The world of form is changeable. It can be changed. It will be changed if we change our minds about it. Holmes continues, thus a practitioner, and I prefer practicer because all of us are practicing. Thus a practicer of this science should not be confused by any given form, but should know that any form which is not of the original harmony is subject to change. The original spirit is harmony, its beauty and truth, and everything that goes with ultimate reality. Here's the part that kicks us, right? We should learn to control our thought processes and bring them into line with reality. Thought should tend more and more towards an affirmative attitude of mind that is positive, stable, and above all else toward a real unity with spirit that is already complete and perfect. So I watched a YouTube video this week by a PhD psychologist guy named Benjamin Hardy, and he was talking about where the power to create or manifest comes from. And he used a quote from the Christian New Testament, from the book of Mark, chapter 11, and then a quote from Florence Scovel Shinn. First from Mark 11. Truly, I tell you, if anyone says to this mountain, go throw yourself into the sea, and does not doubt in their heart, but believes that what they say will happen, it will be done for them. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe you've received it, and it will be yours. And then from Florence, faith knows it is already received and acts accordingly. So I want to remind you about last week's spiritual thought from Dr. Holmes, Science of Mind 416, before I talk about relocating mountains into the ocean. If someone should ask whether or not God has any intention for them, the answer would be that the only intention God could have, if each one is an individual, would be to let the individual alone to discover themselves. God lets us discover ourselves. In fact, God insists on it if we wish to discover ourselves. In this discovery of the self, each individual impresses the law with the images of their own belief about themselves, and then the law creates a form around these images. So I want to take a minute and talk about moving mountains to the ocean. Would we actually want to do that? And if so, why? Is there any way infinite goodness is served by us picking the Catalinas up and dumping them in the Pacific? Or is it a metaphor for something? Ding, ding. What is it saying? There is nothing too hard. There's nothing too big. There's nothing out of reach. We don't need to move the mountains. We just need to change our minds. So I have one more story, and this one's from Mary Morrissey. Many of you, most of you, will know this story. When she was in high school, she got pregnant with her college boyfriend. She was ashamed. She was totally ashamed. She was like, oh my God, life was horrible. And the shame manifested in her body as the destruction of one of her kidneys. And serious damage to the second one. And back then, they didn't have transplants. They didn't have dialysis machines. So it was kind of fatal. If your kidneys were ruined, you were done. And so she was in the hospital, and they were taking the destroyed kidney out. And they didn't give her very long to live. But she's in the hospital, and she's a little freaked. And this chaplain comes in. And the chaplain was a female, so that makes it unusual too. But this chaplain asks her to tell her about her life. And after hearing the story, the chaplain asked if she believed it was possible to be entirely healed before morning. And Mary said no, she didn't. And then the chaplain said, okay, so do you believe it's possible for all of the shame and the yucky, nasty stuff to go into the kidney that the doctors are going to take out? And Mary thought about it a long time, and she said, well, I don't believe it, but you believe it. So I'll hook onto your belief. I can do that. And so Mary hooked her belief onto this chaplain's belief. And when the doctors took the bad kidney, Mary recovered. And Mary went to the doctors afterwards, and the doctor kept saying, I really don't understand this, because that kidney that was, half gone is getting better. And that doesn't happen unless you know how it works. It doesn't happen unless you know how it works. She had an unexplainable healing. And she knew what transpired that night. And she spent the rest of her life so far telling that story and other stories that are related to that, because we know we can make change in form when we're willing to own the power we're connected to. So now I want to talk about power some more and tell you what the rules are around it. It's never power to make somebody else do something. It's never power over anybody else. It's our own relationship with our own power to do our own thing, for our own realization, for our own experience, for our own salvation. But it's never about making anybody else behave. because it's not her job. So my question, are you willing, ready to accept and admit that you are a human of power? I changed that from woman of power, just in case you didn't notice, because we do have some non-women in the room. Are you willing and able to accept that you are a human of power, the same way Edwene did every time she stood up to talk? Think about it. It matters. Because you are the only one who can decide how your life shows up. You are the only one that has access to the power that you have. And if you want to practice with the particulars of spiritual mind treatment, tomorrow night, 5 o'clock, this Zoom channel, we'll practice. So I want to close with a poem by Dr. Tracy Brown, who's a practitioner at CSL Dallas. And it's in a collection called A Bouquet of Stars that was collated by poet Keelan Harkin. Tracy's poem is called Toward Good. What if I focused on today and left yesterday's hurts and heights behind? What if I accepted the past as complete and entered every conversation as new? What if I believed I am one with Spirit and saw today's experiences as answered prayers? What if I saw the gift I am receiving and accepted it without guilt or shame? I am ready to soar without dragging the weight of yesterday's choices or challenges. I'm ready to sing without knowing the words, but trusting the melody will suffice. I'm ready to forgive myself and all others and look through the lens of love. I'm ready to trust there is a power bigger than me moving through me in my life toward good. That's what we get to do over and over and over again. Do that. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now I want to slide into the prayer, the way we pray around here, affirming the good. If I said something useful to you, hold it in your mind while I speak the words. I know that one life lives, moves, and has its being in me and in all. I know that one life shows up as joy, as love, as harmony, as order, as peace. I know that change is an experience. I know that changelessness is what we are. I know that each one already lives at the point of their own power and has what they need to experience the fullness of life as they choose it. I know each individual already as empowered. I know each one as full of spirit and able and capable to step into their greater good. I celebrate life in all the many flavors and facets and colors and shapes and forms. And I celebrate that unity of consciousness that lives behind, within, and through each and all. And I know life is for our good, now and forevermore. Breathing these words in, I accept them, I allow them, I receive them, I relax into them, and I let them be. And so it is.